Hello, I am Freya, and welcome to Wings of Wisdom, where spirituality meets critical thoughts, ancient and modern. This is your map to explore big questions in life, guided by philosophy, the stars, and the spirits. Inhale. Exhale. Wings of Wisdom with Freya. So as this is my first episode of the podcast, yay, I'm just gonna go introduce myself a little bit, which I think is very important to explain why I do the things I do and how I've come into this place. I am currently a researcher practitioner in contemporary art based in London, but often call myself lightworker as well. For those, if you know, you know. But I do have a background in computer science, comparative literature, and philosophy. When I was in the States, that's where you can do a jumble of things. So I did have a very interdisciplinary and academic background in, let's say, interdisciplinary humanities. And I was always trying to locate myself in between departments and buildings and classrooms. I call myself lightworker recently because I've subsumed kind of all my academic work into this kind of energy work that I do. And that's due to my spiritual awakening, for the lack of a better term, the spiritual awakening that happened to me last August. So it's almost like a year, where suddenly my body stopped wanting to go to gym, wanted to do yoga, and I started meditating basically daily. And as for now, I am a regular yoga and meditation practitioner. I've also had been doing astrology and tarot for quite a long time. So astrology was from 2021 and tarot started around 2023. And I was also taking classes from the London School of Astrology, although I was not keeping up on that very much. All this coming together, also I'm graduating from the program I'm studying right now at Central St. Martin's, which is called Master of Research in Exhibition Studies. I'm graduating from it very soon, and I've also hit a point where I think the academic format doesn't hold enough space for what I want to express, especially, when you want to talk about spirituality. It's a little bit difficult to fit into an academic paper. I just felt compelled to start doing a podcast and to just, express the truth that I have, and also hopefully will resonate with your truth that you have, because I know that everyone has kind of pieces of truth within themselves already. And when we discuss, when we talk, when you find something useful, it's just you kind of remembering the truth that you already have. Wings of Wisdom with Freya. So yeah, I think I'll start with philosophy a little bit, because that's where I was. And the philosophy people are usually quite critical of spirituality, let's put it that way, because philosophy is about logic, about rationality, about reasoning, about trying to understand reality in a very clear formatted form, which is what I enjoyed at first. I first started with Schopenhauer, which is somehow the most nihilist classic kind of philosopher, Western philosopher that you could think of, where he was talking about, I don't even remember exactly what I read, but it was just all this struggle with freedom of will, whether we do have will at all, whether we do have freedom at all, and suffering and all this, somehow it attracted me in my high school. So that said something about me as an adolescent. Afterwards, I went into college in the States, where I studied doing comparative literature, which was a self-designed major. And I had a minor in philosophy, which was later I know that was analytic philosophy. And then in my studies within comparative literature, because I have the freedom to take many different courses around the campus, I was in English, film studies, philosophy, classics, and everything. And then I bumped into kind of another system of philosophy that was more interesting. It was difficult to get, but at first, but it was very intriguing. I think it was more fun to do than the philosophy class that I did. That turned out to be critical theory, which was kind of I'd say post-World War kind of turn of philosophy to engage more in social situations, hegemony, critique of ideology, exposing the underlying logic of how capitalism, colonialism, and patriarchy, all these different isms work. And I think that was really interesting. So I was started to pivot into critical theory. And then I have been doing critical theory ever since. And even now in my master's studies, I've used a lot of critical theory as well. And not to ditch it or anything, but I just have realized the kind of difference between specifically Western philosophy and Eastern philosophy, which I kind of always have heard of it, have understood intellectually, but really didn't understand embodiedly, like corporeally, viscerally, until I started meditating. For example, I think the mind-body dualism, which we kind of critique in philosophy and especially in critical theory, you can't go past the pages in talking about that. So I felt like a lot of times you're still trapped very much in the logic mind when you write academic paper, when you engage with theory in a very theoretical way. And then I think meditation just really led me to see how you don't just purely understand something with your mind. So that was just it's a dilemma that I faced kind of with critical theory and theory in general. So that's why I also just moved away a little bit and started exploring new forms of expression, such as with podcasts and other things. There was also a period of time, I think probably when I was reading Schopenhauer and later developed into kind of clinical depression, when I was very much, I think, concerned existentialist. So I was just like thinking about, the meaning of life, if there's meaning at all, if there's meaning in reality, if there is a bigger purpose, if there's more to enjoy. And it was less, I think, an emotional depression, but more, I think, maybe now looking back into it, I think it's more a spiritual kind of depression that happened. And I was actually watched a conversation between Lisa Myler and someone else, and she had a book. Well, she has this idea where depression is actually an invitation for spirituality. It's like your soul kind of nudging you to think of more than just the material, or in my case, like logical, philosophical world. So that's how I am now with philosophy. I feel like I am a runaway daughter somehow. I know this is where I came from, but I think I need some distance to reflect, rethink, and reintegrate kind of my spiritual and emotional learnings with all the past kind of not informational, but mental, intellectual kind of understanding, and to kind of present them in a new way. So I think that's also what I wanted to do in this podcast in the future. Wings of Wisdom with Freya. Now I'm gonna talk a little bit about astrology, which came to me in 2021. Before I became, now I just think I'm fully spiritualist. Whenever I meet someone that I don't see for a long time, I'll tell them, I am more spiritualist than we last met. I did encounter astrology. I think that was an entry point for me into spirituality. It was kind of laying the foundation for me to go in there. But what astrology at first appealed to me was that it was systematic. It's actually not as superstitious as the internet representation of astrology could be, because it's a very strict system and it's very interesting. It's very fun. It's almost like a language that you have to learn. And when you read charts, when you read like stars, you're basically just doing translations. And for me personally, there was a time in 2000. I had the depression was around 2019 and 2020, and 2021. Going into astrology, I think my chart was telling me something that has not something in me that hasn't been reconciled for a long time. Like for those of you who know astrology, my sun and moon is in opposition, which means I was born in a full moon, and also in like 6th house and 12th house, which is a kind of, the mundane and the spiritual kind of tension that's there. And I also have, sorry, I'm going into a little bit of detail there, but I do have a grand cross with my sun, moon, and Neptune and North Node, which made it kind of, challenging for me to figure out who I am, who I was, who I want to be, and what I need. So there was a constant tension in me that I didn't find any language to describe, to understand myself better, until I learned astrology. That was like really helpful for me, myself. And going out, I think that's also what I wanted to offer to a lot of people by, I do a lot of readings for people. I want astrology to help them to see themselves in different angles, in new lights as well. As I mentioned, it's a very fun and complex and serious system of symbols. It's not how philosophy sometimes, especially in the analytic kind, sometimes things are talked very binarily, like how logic is done. There's like and or whatever, sorry. But I think in astrology, like each planet has a variety of meanings, multiple layers of symbolism that's embedded in them. It's very fun to pick certain layers according to how a planet is activated in a chart, and also very interesting because that's a little bit like a channeling experience for me actually, to decide on what to say in regard to a certain like formation in a chart. And it's just fun to make connections, and it's almost, if you like philosophy and especially like literary theory kind of things, that now we have passed a point where every single text has a fixed meaning, whether it's from the author or from the form, the content, or the reader. But we just encourage a plethora, I don't know if I said that right, but an abundance of meaning to be produced. And that is, that's almost like life force. Like in Hawaii, they call this mana. I think I have to find another podcast, maybe a few episodes to talk about Hawaii. But the more the meaning, the merrier. So I think astrology has that potential of giving you a lot of space to think about how things might work. Astrology is also, as ancient as philosophy, maybe even more. That's like humans' traditional ways of aligning with the world, the cosmos. And I think in the beginning, philosophy was thinking about the same thing. Philosophy just means, love of wisdom. And sometimes the wisdom comes from the stars. And I think that's something we've kind of lost over the years, where astrology now, there's many different factors into how it's now just branded sometimes into this spiritual trend, Gen Z kind of thing. But I think there's so much deeper meanings to astrology that sometimes can be really radical. So astrology does offer a new way, a known way of understanding time, kind of aligning the worldly life with the kind of celestial life. Because as you know, we are just part of organism lives living on Earth, and Earth is a planet that abides to this, I think, the cosmic energies and forces. So we should all be humble, I think, into that force that we sometimes, the science is catching up to learn about. But I think there are just so many ways for us to tap into that energy and to realign with the stars. And the time that we're living right now, the calendar we have right now, which is called Gregorian calendar, was invented to collect taxes in like the Roman Empire. So, that's why, that's like taking power away from the people, taking money and power away from people by messing up with their sense of time and their alignment with, I think, a bigger universal kind of force. We don't have to go that far, but I think it's exploring different ways of being, different ways of understanding of epistemology. That's the word we use in philosophy, which means theory of knowledge. So exploring different ways of making knowledge is liberatory. And I think it would help us a lot of times to regain the agency that we have. Astrology is also, I think, in terms of agency, I think it's a wonderful a balance game. You have to find a sweet spot between surrendering to the bigger forces and exercising your own free will. Speaking of Schopenhauer again. But I think there is that balance that each of us needs to find because there is something called spiritual bypassing, where a lot of people in the spiritual community right now are just using the practices, exploiting it to make themselves feel good instead of actually staying true to what needs to be done. Sometimes, it just involves going into your past, seeing your trauma, healing yourself, and also taking responsibility for yourself. Astrology offers that that environment for you to understand why maybe you are the way you are today, but you still have that potential, that agency to change. I always describe astrology as a map of the resources you have, because it just basically tells you there are different paths you can take, and which path you're going to take and how you're going to grow, how you're going to travel is your business, is your decision. So I really like how astrology offers both options. I've been starting to write a monthly astrological energy update on my Substack if you're interested. And the recent one is from May 20th to June 20th, where I covered on Mercury's movement. Mercury is one of the closest planets we have, and also Saturn moving into Aries and Jupiter moving into Cancer. Getting a bit specific here, but my future plan, I think I want to maybe write and also do podcasts on something like Astrology 101 to just educate people, not educate, but share with you this amazing system that I think have been guiding me for quite some time. And it doesn't require you to be spiritualist to have the benefit and to gain and reciprocate from it. So stay tuned for that. I'm also open to suggestions. People have told me that the words that I speak have great value, which thank you. So I'm also just thinking what are some good contents that I can bring out to the people who might benefit from it. I do a lot of meditations, and I do a lot of guided meditations, sound meditations as well, if you're interested. So maybe something on mindfulness, meditation, or I'll definitely do some critical reflection on the wellness industry and also on the kind of yoga retreat industry. And yeah, let me know if you have any suggestions. And yeah. Inhale. Exhale. Wings of Wisdom with Freya. Thank you for listening, watching, and being here. You can find more of my content on Substack, YouTube, and Instagram. I am Freya, and this is Wings of Wisdom. Take care and see you soon.